let's begin our open house investment part of the discussion today. We'll be joined by our CIO Equities, Harshad Patwardhan, as our first speaker. In the last 12 months, Harshad have told us about how not to redeem your investments during the first pandemic. How was it not really an important exercise to undertake after having seen the lockdown and the worst being behind us? How during the US presidential election, he mentioned that it will be risky to be underweight on Indian equities. And more recently, how he explained the importance of volatility not being a true measure of risk. We would like to know from Harshad more about what he has done in the last 12 months, how the portfolios have panned out, and what are his thoughts in regards to Pandemic 2.0. Over to you, Harshad.
Good evening. Thanks a lot for joining this session. What we are going to do now over the next 10, 12 months is look back at 2021, the year that was. Frankly, if you think of last year, it was actually quite a forgettable year in many respects. Some would say it was a nightmarish year. And pretty much all of us from a personal life perspective would like to see the back of a year like that. What we are going to do over the next 10, 12 minutes is to look at certain aspects from investment perspective. How did we cope with last year, which from a healthcare crisis perspective, as all of us know, was once in a century kind of a year. So we will talk about how did we navigate through the turmoil from investment perspective. When the shock hit, there was absolutely no precedent. So how did we deal with that kind of uncertainty? Then we will talk about what Deepak alluded to, is what was the messaging or what was the advice that we gave to our partners through the year? Because it was a year when we got a feedback that advisors also needed some kind of a guidance. So what did we do through the year on that aspect? Then we will talk a little bit about how we changed our sector positioning through the year as things became more and more evident. We will also candidly talk about what worked for us and what did not work for us. And finally, we will have a quick look at how our investment performance was like. So let me start with how we navigated through the turmoil of last year. Before I get into the framework that we used, one important thing that I would like to say, and Radhika says that very often, and we also repeat, from an equity perspective, that we always manage our funds true to the mandate. So in open-ended funds, we do not like to take cash calls because we do realize that advisors and investors give us money after doing their asset allocation. So even through the turmoil of last year, we never really took cash calls. There were temptations to do that. And many of our peers did that, but we stayed true to the mandate and did not take any cash calls. The framework that we used when the shock became more and more evident is a framework that we borrowed actually from a very famous book, Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. I'm sure many of you would have read this book. So the framework we used, it's very simple actually, that you classified. So what we did is when things became apparent, we classified the businesses that we owned in our portfolios into three buckets: fragile, robust, and anti-fragile. And I will very briefly explain what I mean by that. By fragile businesses, these businesses are the ones where the prospects of them, long-term prospects in many cases, will get seriously compromised because of this particular shock. And when we realized, we were very, very ruthless in exiting these stocks, even though the stock prices were down 30-40% from where we bought them. One example that I've written here are multiplexes. So clearly multiplexes is not really, an essential service. So economic shutdown impacted them probably for the longest time. In addition to that, there were some pre-existing trends in the way people absorb entertainment. And this crisis actually made these trends worse. People got more used to watching things on OTT, etc. So these were fragile businesses. Robust businesses are businesses which will, of course, have a very short-term impact from this shock, but no serious durable impact. And therefore, one should ignore, we thought one should ignore the short-time price reaction, and in fact, many times add-on weaknesses. One example that I've given is consumer staples. There were some disruptions on the supply chain side, but they were sorted out very quickly. The third set of businesses are, I would say, most interesting are the anti-fragile businesses, which actually, benefit from the crisis. And Rashesh talked a lot about resilience, right? So these businesses are resilient to the crisis and in fact get better with that. And the example that I've given is in Indian listed space perspective, telecom businesses benefited because everybody went digital, everybody was working from home, and the data volume of telecom companies actually rose as a result of this crisis. So that I thought I will give you a flavor as to how we navigated it. Coming to the advice that we gave to our partners from time to time, as Deepak alluded to already, the first thing that we did in the month of March or April 2020 was to have a pan-India call. And I'm sure many of our partners who are attending today probably attended that call. And we said that this is probably the worst time to sell because there was panic and crash. And we can fully understand because frankly, nobody in their investing life has seen anything like this kind of a crisis where frankly, there is no light at the end of the tunnel because we don't know how we were going to get out of that situation. So we thought that this is the worst time to sell because we reminded people at that point of time, and that was before these measures were announced, that any crisis of this proportion always sees a response from the authorities. So we will have governments and central bankers very, very strongly respond to this kind of a crisis. So the big bazookas that were unleashed, particularly in US and Europe, acted as a counter measure for this crisis. We also reminded people that, all of us have done this in college, that in any growth business, the first few years of cash flows, 1, 2, 3 years of cash flows, probably will account for 5 to 10% of the net present value. And the stock price reaction we saw at that point of time, the market itself corrected by 30% odd. Some stocks were down 40, 50, 60%. And therefore, we thought that this is the worst time to sell. Then fast forward to November 2020, we gave this big call. We normally don't give big calls on the market direction, but we gave a call that it's too risky now to be underweight Indian equities. And the backdrop to that was also, March was all right, but then for several months, we saw big redemptions from Indian investors. Mutual funds faced big redemptions. And we wanted to remind people that it's actually risky not to be owning Indian equities in good measure. The reasons, obviously, we had seen the bottoming out of economic activity. April, May, June quarter, as we know, economy contracted by 25%, but we saw a strong rebound. More importantly, we saw very encouraging signs from corporates, and I'm here referring to listed corporates, which are the bigger and more organized businesses in their sectors, actually showing very, very promising results. And we saw actually actual delivery being better than what the analysts were estimating, and that we saw after almost 6 to 7 years. And we have already seen 2 corporate earnings season where things are looking pretty good. Also, it was very apparent, and it became even more evident in February, that the government and the Reserve Bank, they are completely focused on inducing growth. So the priority will be given to induce growth and employment in the economy, and they will do whatever is within their powers. And we did see in the budget in February that the government is going to be slightly more relaxed about fiscal deficit. Thirdly, why November is, many of you will recall that within days of announcement of US presidential election results, Pfizer, I remember, came in, and then subsequently Moderna. They announced that they have vaccines that work. And for a healthcare crisis, it was very important that vaccines or treatments work, because ultimately the solution to a healthcare crisis has to come from medical field. And that we thought was a big trigger, that there is an availability of vaccine. We did point out at that point of time the 2 risks of second wave. I remember in November, most people thought that India will probably not have a second wave or not have a serious second wave. So we did say that that's a risk. And the other risk is reversal of benign monetary conditions. Lastly, towards the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021, we gave another big call that we expect mid caps and small caps to outperform large caps over the medium term. particularly after 2018 and 2019, which were the worst years on record in terms of relative performance of mid caps versus large caps. Moving on very quickly, apart from the topical issues that we discussed with our partners, we always like to highlight very, very important issues. And these are very, very structural things, but we like to share our learnings with our partners. So we did talk a lot about importance of liquidity in the context of mid cap and small cap mandates. We did talk about how you should not confuse volatility with risk, which many people tend to do. And Rashesh mentioned that there is so much of noise in the media that we tend to be rattled very, very easily. So it's important to separate volatility and the real risk. We also shared in the beginning of this year our learnings from running our mid-cap fund for the past 13 years. What are the various ups and downs we saw and what are the key learnings? And we, from time to time, every quarter, we also talk about why we own what we own, where we highlight some of the sectors that we own and explain the rationale for owning them. So we thought that we had a very robust interaction with our partners through the year. Very quickly on sectoral positioning, when the crisis struck, our first action was actually to reduce financials, because as you know, financials by their very nature are extremely levered entities. So any economic shock, shutdown, NPLs are bound to impact them. So our first action was to reduce the risk in the portfolio. However, as the time passed, we realized that the actual situation was far better than what was feared in the worst days of March and April. But 2-3 things I would like to point out for financials. Many, big quality financials managed to raise equity, which is the ultimate shock absorber in this industry. So they could access capital. Secondly, many bosses of financial firms started saying in their analyst calls that the NPL situation or the restructuring that they will have to do is much lower than what was originally thought just a few months back. So in mid-year, we actually increased our financial weightage. Also, as we develop more conviction that economy has bottomed out and we are on the way up, we reduced consumer and domestic pharma, and we increased cement and industrial. If you look at what our positioning is now at the end of March, you will notice that we are overweight cement, industrial, and also IT services, and we are underweight on consumers and autos. What worked for us and what did not? I think 2-3 things worked very well. One is stock selection really helped us. I mentioned the framework that we used. I think that really turned out to be handy because when a shock of this magnitude hits you, the past valuations really don't help. So stock selection focus was something that helped us. The active management and sectoral changes, some of which I described, I think they helped us. So we changed our portfolio as circumstances changed. And thirdly, as I discussed in some detail, timely sharing of views with our partners also helped, and we got some good feedback from you that it was helpful. What did not work? What did not work was changing the complexion of large cap, mid cap, small caps. Proved extremely tricky and challenging in these volatile times. And frankly, we did have a kind of a double whammy in some of our funds because of that. Hopefully, we will learn from these mistakes and tweak our process to get better at this too. Quickly talking about the performance. On a 1-year basis, you will see 3 of our 4 funds were in the top 2 quartiles. And you will notice that over medium to long term, our performance continues to be very, very strong. I will not really elaborate on that. I know that different people have different ways of looking at performance, but I want to end by talking about rolling returns. And rolling returns is something that I believe gives you a better picture about how the fund manager or investment process has done over longer periods of time. On the slide, you will see 3. The first one actually is something that is that fund has changed its positioning and nature several times over the last 13 years it has been around. So I will focus on the next 2, where more or less the strategy and the peer group has been constant. You will notice that the mid-cap fund, which I talked about, which has longer than 13 years of history, on a 3-year and 5-year rolling basis, almost 88 to 90% of the times, we have been in top 2 quartiles. FlexiCap fund where if you look at the returns from 1, 3, 5-year perspective, they may look less than satisfactory. But on a rolling return basis, you will notice that 97 to 100% of the times they have been in top 2 quartiles. And I believe that this particular measure of performance is the one that actually looks at the resilience of the investment process and the investment team. That if you fall, of course, there will be bad times, bad quarters, bad years, but do you bounce back? And that is something that I believe rolling returns measure. And I think we have done a decent job on that count. Deepak, I'm through with my slides.
Thank you, Arshad, for taking us through to the entire last 12 months, how we positioned our portfolios at various points in time, and it helped investors witness strong performance. We also have few questions for you, Arshad, which we have been able to receive from our participants today. And I would like to pose few of them just now and maybe a few at the end of the sessions today. The first question that comes from the participants is, there have been a cyclical rally, a value-driven rally post the US elections right up till this pandemic. What is your take on this entire debate with regards to high quality, growth-oriented stocks vis-a-vis cyclicals and value-driven businesses?
Okay, so Deepak, in our industry, people use value and growth terms often, but I suspect that everybody means different by what he means by value and what he means by growth. So I will give you one one answer, but there are different ways of describing it. So in my opinion, growth businesses you can consider from a fixed income perspective. You can talk about them as long duration businesses, because in any growth firm, by growth, if people mean that typically very high valuation, what that means from an NPV perspective, or if you do the cash flow analysis, what it means is that investors are prepared to give value to long-term cash flows, because this company will be around for 20, 30, 40 years. So, one way to put it is look at them like long duration businesses, right? So when you have a situation that economic recovery is going to improve and at some stage, the interest rates are going to go up, chances are that the high long duration businesses, like in the case of fixed income, are likely to underperform the short duration businesses, relatively speaking. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, yes, in the context of India, the cyclical businesses, which have actually not done well from a stock market perspective, because Indian economy, all of us, this discussion is about last year, but we know that for the last 7 years, and Rashesh did talk about some of the events along the way, demonetization, GST, IL&FS crisis, etc. Last 7-8 years, Indian economy has been either stagnating or decelerating. So when we have a situation that Indian economy is going to go up, businesses which are levered to that economic growth are likely to outperform, high quality, high valuation businesses. That's another way of looking at it.
Thanks a lot, Arshad. We mentioned about the 3 broad, commentary that you made in last 12 months. 2 of them were very, very contextual, very topical. But the one that you recently released was with regards to volatility being a friend and not necessarily a risk measure. Can you just elaborate on that for the benefit of people who have not seen it?
Sure. So, one thing that Rashesh also highlighted, that we are bombarded by, too much of noise in the markets, right? So in a lighter vein, I have written in that note that investing is not like a live commentary on an ongoing T20 match. You don't want to know ball by ball what's happening. Because when you're investing, I presume that people are investing for 3 years and 5 years. So you don't really want to know every day what is the news flow about the markets, what is the news flow about. I can understand why media does that. But I think we should not be, because the moment you expose yourself too much to that, you are bound to get perturbed. That's just human nature. So the most important thing to do is to cut out the noise and focus on what really matters. What is it that is likely to change the earnings of this company, and so on. So if you do that, I think that's useful. So volatility, many people believe that if something is more volatile, therefore that's more risky. That's clearly not true. what I would define as a risk from an investment perspective is not to be able to attain your investment objective. So if your investment objective is in 3 years time, 5 years time, you want to generate a certain kind of returns. If that is not attained, that's risk. But volatility doesn't really, risk you that particular investment objectives.
So Harshad, the last question before we end today's your part of discussion, and we'll ask you to join the end of the session again, is with regards to valuation of mid and small cap versus the large cap. In last 2-3 years, we have seen a decent rally on the mid and small cap segment. Where do you see the valuation gap today, or is it closer to its peak?
Okay, apologies for the internet problems. I think I was off I hope I'm audible now. Can you hear me well, Deepak? Okay, all right. So, when it comes to comparing valuations of mid caps and large caps, I think one of the mistakes that many people do is to do that comparison at the index level. So, you generally, I've seen in the industry people talking about Nifty valuations versus mid cap index valuations. Now, that's plain wrong and it's misleading. Worse is because the complexion of Nifty businesses and mid cap index businesses are very, very different. So, if you have to do the comparison, you should do it at a sectoral level. So, for example, you may want to look at a mid-cap cement business versus a large cap cement business, or a mid-cap private sector bank versus a large cap private sector bank. That's the right way to do it. And we have, as Deepak, we have done quite a bit of work on this. So if anybody is interested, we can send across those slides. So my experience shows that, and many people believe that mid-caps have to trade at a discount to large caps. And where it comes from? It comes from an innate, implicit belief that mid-caps means lower quality. And that's simply not true. In fact, the way we manage our mid-cap and small-cap business mandate is that we want to buy leading companies in smaller segments. We are not compromising on quality at all. And we have seen actual examples, and we can share that with you, that in the same industry, mid-caps can trade at a premium to large caps. So when I look at, in the context of our portfolios, mid-cap portfolio and small-cap portfolio, on a PEG basis, price to earnings growth basis, both the portfolios at the end of the March were trading at about 0.8 times, which suggests to me that the valuations are not very expensive compared to the growth opportunities in the underlying businesses.
Thanks a lot, Harshad. We'll come back to you at the end of all the sessions. Thank you so much.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.